Our colleagues Bruce Katz from the Brookings Institution and Professor Ricky Burdett from the London School of Economics have introduced this idea of the next economy, a way of explaining, if you like, what cities will need to do, what metropolitan economies will look like if they're going to succeed globally in the next period of time. And by looking at the experiences of Europe and Asia, and looking at the cities that have done the most to overcome crises in the past, they've begun to develop an idea of what the route out of crisis is, what that economy needs to be based on, and what kind of leadership is needed to make it work. So in terms of the content of the next economy, the idea is essentially this, that the next economy needs to be much more based on production and productivity and much less based on consumption and disposable income. It needs to be focused on embracing a green, low-carbon, post-oil environment with new tools and products and services, new sources of energy, which will enable us to have low-carbon economies. It needs to be focused on trading with the growing markets that exist around the world, particularly in what we used to call the emerging economies and the economies below them, as it were, in the development cycle. And it needs to be based very much on human capital, knowledge and skill-based activity, and that will need to be supported by a high quality of life. So production, trade and export, green, human capital, skills, quality of life, and economic diversification. It will need to be about cities, metropolitan areas, having a broad base of activities which enable them to be more resilient in a crisis environment. Now, thinking about the case studies from Europe and the case studies from North America, we tried to distill, as it were, what are the lessons from America in terms of building the next economy, and what are the lessons from Europe and from the leading cities around the world. So when we think about America, we know, for example, that American approaches to economic development have emphasized some very important things that some of us have forgotten about. Firstly, the importance of a good business climate, a good environment for business and for investment to thrive. That's very important. Secondly, the ability to be open to attract immigration and human capital from other places, and to provide a system that integrates people quickly and enables them to be productive. Thirdly, there's been a very strong focus on having infrastructure which creates connectivity, creates the ability to build a productive platform in the economy. And then fourthly, overall, I think, the strong emphasis on the entrepreneurial spirit, the ability of small entrepreneurs and large companies to behave in ways that take advantage of opportunities when they come and innovate to create new products and services. So these four big things, I think, are our lessons from America: business climate, openness and integration, the economic value of infrastructure, and the importance of enterprise development. America learnt those things 50 years ago and has been teaching other parts of the world those things for some time. When we look at the experience in Europe, I think it's rather different but complementary to the American experience. And what we've learned from looking at the experience of Munich and Turin and Barcelona, cities that have overcome crises in the past, is that firstly, aligned government is very important. Local government, regional government and national government have to have the shared common agenda that lasts beyond one electoral cycle and lasts into a number of business cycles. This has been the case in those cities where they've been able to forge long-term agendas with clarity and with confidence, with all orders or tiers of government working together. That's been enormously successful in enabling them to leverage private sector partnership, particularly partnership from chambers of commerce and other kinds of business institutions. In other words, within the metropolitan area, there has to be one long-term plan that everybody backs, not multiple plans. The second lesson from Europe has really been one about internationalization. The process of European integration over the past few years has meant that cities within the European system have had to learn how to position themselves within an evolving, open, international marketplace. The European Union has been a kind of test bed for globalization for European cities, enabling them to practice the arts of trade and cooperation, of attracting students, tourists and others from other markets, and the ability to export and to form collaborations, supply chain and value chain collaborations with other places. That's been very important. The third lesson from Europe has really been a very strong focus on the knowledge economy and innovation, but in particular the ability to modernize the existing manufacturing systems of Europe, to apply new technologies and new ideas to existing industries in order to make them competitive and attractive again. And this has been done very well with the automobile industry in Europe. It's also been done very effectively with other kinds of manufacture, and as it were, high-tech and precision manufacturing is still a very important part of the European economy. The fourth thing that's been very important has been the insight from Europe about the relationship between quality of place, quality of life, and human capital. In other words, Europe's cities have been very attractive places historically, and over the past 50 years Europe has systematically reinvested in the attractiveness of its cities, creating downtown living, inner city living, urban attractiveness, greening of the cities, augmenting the cultural offer with new kinds of creative propositions, so that European cities have become magnets for human capital. And then human capital, of course, people with a very diverse range of skills, have been able to contribute to this next economy that we're talking about. In other words, one of the insights from Europe is it's hard to embrace the kinds of ingredients of the next economy that we've been talking about without having attractive and sustainable cities to go with them. The fifth insight from Europe has really been about embracing low carbon. European economies have been focused on building low carbon products and services and processes for some time, and many European cities have now become global leaders in different aspects of low carbon product or low carbon technology, and that's been extremely important. So when we sit back and think about this next economy, and we think about the lessons from America, and we think about the lessons from Europe, and we begin to learn from cities like Seoul and Sao Paulo and others, the lessons from Asia, from Latin America and from elsewhere, I think we can see that combined, the world's cities have enough knowledge and enough wisdom to know how to do this. The question is, can we enable all of them to learn quick enough to be able to take forward the opportunity of the current moment, which is to build an economy which is much more sustainable, much more resilient, and much less, as it were, susceptible to the kind of crisis that we experienced in the past few years.